In the early morning hours of September 27, 1997, a Franklin, Indiana police officer spotted an abandoned maroon 1990 Pontiac Grand Am near the intersection of Earlywood Drive and Graham Road. The keys were still in the ignition, the car was not running, but the lights were still on. There was no sign of the driver. A purse and a wallet belonging to a Franklin college student named Kelly Eckart were found in the passenger seat.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
Vacation edition.
Woo-woo.
And if you're listening to this, that means you're a patron.
And we love you.
And we thank you so much for your support.
Yes, we do. We appreciate it. And so tonight's episode, instead of, we're taking a vacation home. And by home, I mean for me. We're going to talk about a case that actually hits really close to home. It goes back to my hometown of Franklin, Indiana, and born there. I mean, the coolest thing to ever come out of Johnson County was me. Johnson County Memorial Hospital, October 10th, 1975. Anyway,
now
so
someone's going to steal your identity.
Good. Let them have it. Doesn't get you anything. Just get you maybe a cup of coffee if you're lucky. So tonight we are going to reference a couple locations. Just to give you a little background on this, a couple of locations, one of them being Brown County. Anyone who has ever been to Indiana and around that area, the place called Brown County is, it's a beautiful, beautiful state park. And we used to go there all the time in the summer and right about fall because the leaves would start to turn and it was so beautiful. And this was one of those scenarios where I actually learned that the really, really, really tall trees aren't as tall as you think. They're just growing on hills. So I used to think, I'm like, those trees are so big. But then you start walking and realize you just go up these massive hills. So, of course, the trees aren't that tall. The earth is that tall. So the trees were all the same size. They were just on the hills. So, but it was a really neat scenario there. But it was a great park. We used to spend a lot of time there, I should say. The other one would be Camp Atterbury. Now, Camp Atterbury is a whole different animal because it's actually an active working camp. It's basically for the National Guard. We used to go there actually in the summertime in a place called Foxfire. This was a cabin that was there called Foxfire. And for some reason, I can't remember the whole scenario, but I think my dad knew someone that not lived there, but was there on the base, were friends with somebody. So we would actually go and stay at this cabin, again, called Foxfire. And they would mushroom hunt for the morel mushrooms. So we'd stay at this cabin. It was, all the family was there. I mean, we'd have 20, 30 people there. Everyone would play euchre. Euchre's a card game for people from Ohio and Indiana, Michigan, right on that area. Most people don't know. I would love to play euchre. Do you know how to play euchre?
No.
I have to teach you one day. And then we could be partners.
I can play spades.
And dominoes. I can't do that. I've never played spades before.
Oh, it's addicting.
I'd have to learn.
You have to have 4 people, though, and you're on teams.
Can the dogs play?
No.
We would beat their asses so bad. But no, we used to go, like I said, this cabin, and out behind the cabin was this massive lake. And in the summertime, this lake would dry up. So you would actually see the fighter jets come in, and they would literally like bomb certain areas around. So you, as you're watching these jets fly by, they would literally drop bombs. And I remember one time we were out of the lake. It was in the morning time. It was like freaking 7:00 in the morning. And me and my brother were walking across this lake, and we saw the fighter jet come in. He was, real low, to the point where it almost moved your hair when he flew over. And I remember taking my arms and putting them out there and kind of doing my wings, like dipping the wings. And he literally did the same thing back in the jet, and he flew by me.
Oh, wow.
And after that, I was just fascinated with jets for the longest time. It was the coolest thing ever. So we're going to reference Brown County, which I've been to. Camp Atterbury. I actually used to take field trips to Camp Atterbury. It was really, really, really beautiful place. And here's the freakiest part of this particular case, and the reason I picked it is a couple of people we're going to mention. Scott and Michael Overstreet in this case. We're going to mention them.
They're brothers.
They are brothers. Well, my oldest brother used to be friends and knew Michael Overstreet. My second oldest brother was really good friends with Scott Overstreet. And these people were actually, I've been to their house. I think they may have even been at our house. Now, Scott, he was probably closer to my brother's age, so they spent a lot more time with him. So as we progress, you'll see why it's really weird that, going way back to when I was a kid, these are people that you run into. And I'm sure everybody has one of these stories, but we're going to go ahead and get started here. It's actually, the story is not about the overstreet. The most important part to remember always is the victim is the story. So, Lauren, you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about who we're talking about this evening?
We're talking about Kelly Eckart. So Kelly Eckart was 18 years old and had just begun attending Ben Franklin College in Franklin, Indiana, after graduating from Triton High School earlier that year. She lived with her parents, Connie and Dale Sutton, in Bogstown, Indiana, a couple towns over, and was working her way through school with part-time shifts at the Walmart in Franklin. She is described by her close friends as a hardworking student. Her mother describes her as very friendly and outgoing. She was so excited to be making new friends and living the college dream. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary in Kelly's life. She had no reason to run away. This is why it was very suspicious to find her car abandoned on the route from her work to home, roughly 10 miles outside of town.
A little tidbit about Franklin College. The trailer park we used to live in, I used to have to ride my bike to school. I rode right by Franklin College every single day, and out front there was a big statue of Ben Franklin, hence it's named after. They used to paint the statue every graduation and different events, and they'd have to come back and sandblast it. I used to walk right by that college every single day.
Wow.
So on Friday, September 26th, 1997, Kelly had worked an evening shift as a cashier at the Walmart until about 11 p.m. Then she met with her boyfriend, Anthony Evans, to do a little shopping. And afterwards, they both left the store in separate vehicles. Evans headed north on US 31 towards Whiteland. Kelly turned east onto Earlywood Drive towards her home in Bogstown. Sadly, she would never be seen after that again.
When police found her car abandoned and determined that there was no issues with it, they contacted her mother, Connie, who said Kelly was very reliable and would have contacted her if she was going to be even 15 minutes late. Connie also explained that Kelly had to work the next day. Police then spoke to her coworkers at Walmart to determine the last time she had been seen and who she had been seen with. Of course, they spoke with her boyfriend, Anthony Evans, who had gone straight home after leaving Walmart that night. Franklin Police Chief Harry Furrer put out a statement later that day to the local news stating the evidence is pointing to something is not right here. Furrer refused to give details of the disappearance or the found car, but he made the public aware that there had been an abduction. Several volunteers quickly gathered to comb the back roads of both Johnson and Shelby counties, walk rural paths, and to post signs and hand out flyers around the area. This included one local that was called in by the police because he owned a helicopter. However, nothing was found.
Now, on Monday, September 29th, a candlelight vigil was held at the Bogstown Presbyterian Church in honor of Kelly and prayers for a safe return. But the next day would bring tragedy to this whole community. So just a real quick discussion. You notice how quickly this escalated? So usually you hear persons missing, they're 18 years old. They say, they're 18, there's nothing they can do. Call us in 48 hours.
Yeah.
Usually that's the case, right?
Yeah.
So, but here's a situation in this case where I guess because of the suspicious underlying circumstances.
Because they found the abandoned car.
The abandoned car. I mean, do you think that would prompt it? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that finding the abandoned car would definitely point more toward abduction or something fishy rather than somebody just taking off or missing.
Yeah, like he said, that when he in his quote, the evidence is pointing to something's not right here. I guess that makes sense. Because
a lot of times, unfortunately, if somebody's an adult, the police don't really want to act immediately.
Yes. And that's why I was asking you the question, because usually they say, call us in 48 hours, or they're an adult, they can go missing. But I guess with the suspicious, that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So now, like I talked about earlier, now in Brown County, which is just south of Johnson County, on Tuesday, September 30th at 11:57 a.m., two women were walking down a one-lane gravel road known as West Richards Road, and they spotted a body on an embankment 15 feet off the roadway. The partially clad body of a white female appearing to be in her late teens or early 20s was discovered. For 4 days, searchers and law enforcement held out hope that Kelly would be found alive, safe, and police had gathered hundreds of volunteers to search and hand out thousands and thousands of flyers. They had set up special tip hotlines and even worked with neighboring and state law enforcement to locate Kelly. And this is why this is so very devastating to everyone, to learn that clothing and jewelry on the body appeared to belong to Kelly. So at this point, they know or feel like they found Kelly, and it's not a good result.
Well, the autopsy would later confirm that the dental records matched that of Kelly Eckart. Police quickly switched their investigation to a homicide investigation and would not release any information regarding what they found with the car or her cause of death. They also announced a reward and asked the public for help in seeking the person or persons responsible for her murder. So after her funeral on October 8th, the local media filed a lawsuit to have Kelly's certificate of death released and made public. They felt that the public had a right to know. It was later determined that Kelly had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and appeared to have been shot with what was described as a wax bullet or a stun gun. Now, wax bullets are typically used in a primed cartridge case with no gunpowder and are not normally lethal. They have enough power and are usually used to stun an animal prior to slaughter. Typically, these were used on livestock farms. Plenty of those in Indiana, I assume.
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of those. Yeah, there's plenty of those, cornfields and soybean fields, which, just on a different side note, you ever ran through a cornfield?
No.
Shit hurts.
So this situation right here just brings me immediately to the Delphi case. Now here, the local media filed a lawsuit for Kelly's death certificate and to find out that she had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and appeared to have been shot with this weird wax bullet. Whereas this is 1997.
Yeah.
So 20 years later in 2017, with the murder of Abby and Libby in Delphi, Indiana, they still have not released the cause of death. They have not released whether there was any sexual assault. They have not released whether they had DNA or not. So I wonder what laws have changed there in Indiana, because obviously 20 years earlier, they got the
media could sue.
Yeah.
Lawsuit.
Well, now they are holding in Delphi. They are holding that close to the vest.
I think I have this would be the only thing that I could find that would dictate why this was okay and releasing the information in Delphi is not. And it has to do with age. Kelly was 18. We're talking about minors. So I think, remember, when you're a minor, that changes the aspect of everything. Would you agree?
Yes, but...
Well, some of the stuff you want to keep sort of under the cuff, and they still did. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but there's still some information that was not released. But the cause of death was released. But I think it has to do with minors. I don't know, because we're talking about, we don't know in the Delphi case, but I have a strong suspicion that maybe there was some sexual wrongdoing in that case, even though they're not releasing it. I think they don't want to because of that. So I'm not 100% certain. That's a good question. Why 20 years later they would not release it.
It's the same state. Well, I don't know. I was just wondering.
Okay. Well, maybe there's something new in the tape. On October 17th, police make a public request to assist their department in locating Kelly's shoes. The next day, a witness reports seeing Kelly's shoes and socks in an outdoor restroom at a Johnson County park near Camp Atterbury. And Camp Atterbury, like I said earlier, is a 33,000-acre facility that is home to the Indian National Guard. It is a public facility with parks, picnic areas, and they're scattered everywhere. So as you drive about, there's different places you can stop. There's a lot of hunting there. I mean, it's a huge facility for a lot of that outdoor activity. It's a very wooded area, and it's a functioning training facility. This is where the National Guard still trains today. And it just seemed odd that her shoes would be left there in a restroom, and they actually found them in a toilet, and one of the shoes was missing its shoelace.
So, as we learned just a minute ago that she was strangled, so was it manual strangulation or possibly ligature strangulation with the shoelace that's missing?
We're going to have to find that out later on here shortly when we get the rest of the stuff released. Remember, they just released the cause of death.
All right, so police brought in search teams to see if they could locate a crime scene. They knew that the site where the body was found was considered only a dump site, and they thought they could find more clues if they could find the location where the crime was actually committed.
Makes sense.
Franklin police were notified when the skeletal remains of another woman were found on Sunday, November 2nd in the Fish and Wildlife area of Camp Atterbury, known as Teal Marsh.
It's a pretty good distance away, but still in the same park.
The medical examiner believed that the woman also died from strangulation. The investigators reported that she had been missing her shoes. Now, dental records quickly identified the woman as Sharon Myers, a 26-year-old wife and mother who was last seen at 6:15 on May 13th in the parking lot of her work. She worked in the HR department of Arvin's Gladstone plant in Columbus. Arvin's was a muffler manufacturing plant.
Where my grandma used to live, literally right across the street was the Arvin's plant in Franklin. So we would sit out there and you could watch all the guys come out for lunch and all this different stuff. You know, my grandma used to sell Avon. One time she had so much Avon stuff. She used to make a killing with that shit. But she had so much that she had me and my cousin. She paid us to go set up a booth and sell all of her Avon stuff to all of the Arvin's workers. So all these grown men were coming out there and laughing at us. But they would buy the stuff for their wives and stuff. It was really on the cheap. But anyway, so the Arvin's manufacturing plant, they made mufflers for Detroit and all the auto manufacturers. Okay, so at first, let's get back to the story. I ramble off. It just takes me back to hometown. So that's what happens. So at first, police believe that they may be hunting a serial killer. Makes perfect sense, right? You got multiple deaths,
both missing their shoes, both found near Camp Atterbury.
Similar MOs, exactly.
Yeah.
So now both cases, like I said, had striking similarities. Both women, they were abducted from their workplaces. They both had died of ligature strangulation, and both were left in remote wooded areas. And again, both were found without shoes. So we definitely have to put these two together. Quote, "We couldn't eliminate the possibility of the cases being related," said Sergeant Doug Lee of Columbus Police Department. "We have several suspects and one that stands out more than others." Police departments began sharing info to determine if there was a connection. In the 6 weeks since their bodies was found, the Franklin police had over 1,000 hours of investigation into the case and had been following up on over 800 tips and leads. And one of these tips was about a man who drove a pickup truck with a camper, and he was parked at the Walmart parking lot. The tipster claimed that the truck was there every single night and was even there on the night Kelly had gone missing. And the police set up a surveillance on the parking lot, and sure as shit, the truck showed up. And come to find out, the man was a 37-year-old construction worker named Jeff Wagner. And he said that he was going through a divorce and would go to Walmart every night to look at and meet women. So you just go there to stare at women.
Is that the spot to meet women? I mean,
if you got a creepy camper, sure. I mean, if you got a camper, you know. So now he told investigators that he had nothing to do with Kelly's murder and even provided a DNA sample, which eventually was determined to not match any of the DNA found on Kelly's body.
Then a promising tip came in. On November 6th, detectives began questioning Scott Overstreet. At first, he denied knowing anything, but eventually he finally began talking and admitted that his brother had called him on the night of September 27th. He asked to meet him at a hotel. He was then asked to drive his brother's van. He told police that he had seen an unconscious girl in the back of the van under a blanket. He transported his brother Michael and the girl to a remote wooded area where he dropped them off. Scott told detectives that he feared his brother because he always carried a gun or a knife and feared what may happen if he didn't do what he was told. When questioned, Michael Overstreet's wife, Melissa, even told investigators that she had gone out to Camp Atterbury that evening to pick up Michael, the same night that Scott confirmed he had dropped him off there. Scott took investigators out to Camp Atterbury and showed them where he had dropped off his brother, and police knew this was where the crime scene was. They found some of the missing items that belonged to Kelly, her pager, glasses, and some hair clips. With this information, detectives arrested 30-year-old Michael Dean Overstreet for the murder of Kelly Eckart. Many of the hundreds of tips received by police implicated Michael Overstreet, but their big break was the statement by his brother Scott.
When Scott decided he wanted to start talking, then they realized, holy shit, we got the right people. There's nothing better if you're a detective, an investigator, you get a tip and all of a sudden it's like it just hits your desk. And everybody who watches crime shows, once that tip hits the desk and you get it and you start going after it, it's like, oh, we got it. It's got to be a good feeling.
Yep.
Now the Suttons, Kelly's parents, received the news in a phone call from Chief Furr at 10:30 in the evening on November 6th with the words, quote, "We got him." Kelly's mother was very relieved, but the suspect was very puzzling to her because she had never heard of him, and they had no relationship with him, And the only thing that she can figure is maybe he had gone through her line.
So maybe he had gone through her line at Walmart?
Yeah, so they think that's going to be the only connection is possibly, maybe he went through Walmart line or something.
Once Overstreet was taken into custody, of course he denied any involvement in Kelly's murder.
Of course.
Further investigation into a warrant served on his home surfaced a hand-drawn map of Brown County where Kelly was found. Also found was a .22 caliber firearm with some wax ammunition.
Odd.
The gun was what PD used in their probable cause affidavit to secure the warrant, stating that they believed that Kelly had been knocked out with the stun gun, what they were calling the wax bullet that she was shot with, prior to her abduction. Police also impounded his van, which was said to be the one he was driving the night Kelly was seen in it. There was no connection ever made with Overstreet in the Myers case. Columbus PD would later make an arrest and convict a former coworker, Jason Hubble, for the murder of Myers over a dispute regarding how she was handling his medical leave case at their job. This was a relief to the community to know that there was not a serial killer and no need to worry.
Yeah, once they got Michael Overstreet arrested and they couldn't pin anything to him, they're like, okay, well, what's this other case? And they ended up finding out that it was a coworker that was just pissed off, sadly. And of course, that's a shit that drives me crazy. Who is Michael Dean Overstreet? Like I said before, now this kid he didn't come around so much. They really hung out with they hung out with Scott. Michael didn't come around as much and hang out with my brothers, but they did hang out with Scott. I mean, they walked together. They went to different places. They went to school together. So that's why this kind of hits a little close to home. We should have had
your brother join us for this episode.
We might we may bring him in maybe for an off topic or something to discuss it, because I would really like to get his feel for it. Like I said, I had because I used to I was the youngest of 3 older brothers, so I would have to go with them. And so sometimes we literally been over to his house. So this was really an odd scenario. Like I said, who is Michael Dean Overstreet? Michael Overstreet was born November 18th, 1966. He was a factory worker that had no real criminal record to speak of up till now. He did a short period of time in the military, but was discharged for psychological reasons. He married Melissa Holland, whom he had met in high school, and they had several children together, 4, I believe. I think 4. Melissa was featured in an episode, actually, of the ID channel's Evil Lives Here. That's how fucked up this guy is. This is where she describes him as very controlling and threatening. In high school, she said that she actually refers to him as Dean, but we'll call him Michael. In high school, she said that Michael would help make her feel safe and that no one would mess with her while she was with him. She had some stints where she was being bullied, and once she met him, they knew don't mess with her. So that's actually what they talk about in the show. Now, early on, he treated her very well, as always. Most you get in a fresh relationship, it's always really good. Things seemed to change as the relationship progressed, and he wouldn't even let her talk to other people and was worried she would leave him for someone else. She says that one time he brought a gun to school because he was upset with her for talking to another guy and buying his band poster from him. This was all in the show. She said that he was very angry and was going to take care of the poster issue. So he brings a gun to school. Now, this is obviously he's gone a little too far. Your girlfriend buys a poster from some guy, so you bring a gun to school. Kind of shows you a little fucking crazy.
Red flag?
Yeah, much? Red flag, much. Hashtag red flag. Now, she was so scared when she found out he had a gun and that he was going to do something to this guy that she knew that was a friend of hers that bought the poster from, that she told a teacher. And the cops were obviously called in. So, of course, when the cops got called in, now he was very pissed off when he found out that she had told the teacher and the teacher had called the cops on him. Although she claims in the show that he had never hurt her. Now, she says that he gradually got worse and worse, and he would come home and have her lock the doors, close the curtains, and take the kids and hide them. I guess he was fucking panicking.
Why she would have to hide the children?
Yeah.
From what?
She said that she just figured he was having another psychotic episode because he used to say he was working for a hitman and couldn't discuss what he was doing. So he was working for a hitman. So basically, he's really fucking out there. And again, obviously, if you have a story to tell about your significant other that gets you on Evil Lives Here, the ID channel,
yeah,
you're fucking whacked out. Now, eventually, she says that he grew more demanding of her, not allowing her to work or have friends, and she was not allowed to question where he was going or what he was doing. Now, in the ID episode, she talks about how Michael would always be sharpening knives, and one day he jumped up to react one time and cut her when he got angry. So he was pissed off, he jumped up and accidentally cut her. And I guess he freaked out and claimed he didn't mean to do it, and it was all, oh, I didn't mean to do that, I'm so sorry, you know, that shit that they do.
Yeah.
So, and what's that called?
Gaslighting.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I guess that makes sense as to why Scott was scared too, because he was panicked a little bit when his brother, because he knew his brother wasn't right.
Yeah. Well, obviously.
Yeah, he's a little off.
He's off.
Yeah. If the military kicks you out because you are fucking crazy.
Yeah. After Overstreet's arrest, evidence taken from the home began to help investigators put the pieces of the puzzle together. Investigators had found damage to the rear bumper of Kelly's car. The damage they found was the same height as the bumper on Overstreet's van. They also found several fibers that appeared to be green nylon carpet fibers on Kelly's clothes. The lab compared these fibers to the carpet in his van and determined that they were visually the same. There also were white fibers that were found on Kelly's clothes that matched a white blanket that was found in Overstreet's home. DNA obtained from Kelly's body and compared to both Scott and Michael's DNA. The markers were an exact match for Michael Overstreet. Comparisons showed that a 1 in 4 trillion odds of another match.
So you're saying there's a possibility?
No. No.
Now, once determining that Scott was being truthful, prosecutors gave immunity to him for his part in the crime, as long as he provided his testimony in court. And like we talked about before, and I'm gonna say it every damn time, because you got to be 100% truthful. So in other words, you can't go changing what you told the investigators originally. You got to stick to your story, and it has to be 100% truthful for you to actually get immunity. Because if you default on that, now your ass could get tied in with this, and that's the last thing he wanted to do. Your brother pulls some dumb shit, calls you to help out, and as a family member, you help out and you panic a little bit, and then you get brought into this when you didn't do. Because he didn't really do anything. I mean, he did. He should have told somebody. You know, if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
But he was scared for his life, and I kind of understand that because he was definitely a little unstable. Now, originally, Public Defender Roy Dickinson was assigned to defend Overstreet, but he's replaced quickly with former Judge Jeffrey Eggers, who quickly requested a change of venue, and that, of course, was ultimately denied originally. Now, it's funny because Jeffrey Eggers was the name I used to see in the newspaper all the time. And when my dad ran for coroner up there, I remember seeing Eggers was running for judge. The signs, the political signs, we used to post them all over the place.
Eggers, that's a name you don't forget.
No, it isn't. Now, on April 15th of 1998, after all the parts were put together and the DNA results were an exact match, Johnson County Prosecutor Lance Hamner decided to seek the death penalty against Overstreet. The charges against Overstreet included rape, criminal deviant conduct, confinement, and felony murder. Eggers, of course, resigns as counsel, and court appointed Jeffrey Baldwin and Peter Nugent, who both specialize in the death penalty case. As we know, after Jose Baez and Top Mom, cases got to have a death penalty expert on hand.
Yes.
Why? Can you just take 2 seconds to explain that to me, why that is?
Well,
I know I'm going to ask you every time.
A death penalty case is obviously much more, they're all serious, but a death penalty case means that there's a life on the line. And there are certain lawyers who have taken extra educational courses. They have experience. There's certain hoops they have to jump through to be considered a death penalty qualified attorney. And if there's a death sentence possibility, then you have to have at least one member of the defense team must be a death penalty qualified attorney.
And that's why that Jose Baez brought in that Colonel Sanders looking dude.
Yeah, Cheney.
Was it Cheney? Yeah, he showed up a couple times with that Colonel Sanders.
Yeah.
But that's why, because he was actually the death penalty.
He was the death penalty qualified.
Even though Jose Baez was the one that was really putting the pieces together.
Yes. So there were several requests for a change of venue, which were denied. Even Overstreet's mother, Mary, wrote to the newspaper column stating that her son could not receive a fair trial in Johnson County because of all the pre-trial publicity.
Small town USA, word moves faster than a Tiger King meme.
On February 16th of 1999, Overstreet attempted suicide in his padded cell.
Damn.
He was trying to hang himself So they moved him from the Johnson County Jail to the state prison until the start of his trial. On September 5th of 1999, after all requests and family outcry, Judge Eckert finally decided to keep the trial in Johnson County but select a jury from neighboring Clark County. The defense was offered a plea deal, as most death penalty cases will, of plead guilty and will take the death penalty off the table. They refused the deal and said they could prove that their client was not mentally stable enough to stand trial. Both prosecutors and defense requested an evaluation, which ultimately led the judge to rule that Michael was mentally fit to proceed. So Overstreet's trial began on May 1st of 2000 in Johnson County, where prosecutor Lance Hamner presented this storyline of events on the night of Kelly Eckart's murder.
On the night of her murder, witnesses placed Overstreet at the Walmart where Kelly worked. Hamner said that Overstreet waited and followed Kelly home from work and bumped the rear end of her car. This is what forced her to stop. When she got out of the car to see what the damages were, Overstreet drew out his .22 and shot her in the forehead with the wax bullet. Now this knocked her out, but didn't kill her. While she was out, he loaded her up in his van, then contacted his brother Scott to meet him at the motel. Scott then drove them out to the Atterbury Game Preserve. Now once they were there, Michael took Kelly out of the van, then asked Scott to come back and pick him up in about an hour, but Scott refused, so instead Overstreet instructed Scott to call his wife Melissa and have her come to the rifle range near Camp Atterbury in 2 hours to pick him up. Scott left the van and went as directed to Overstreet's home, where he talked to his sister-in-law Melissa Overstreet. Once Scott was gone, Michael carried Kelly into the wooded area where he sexually assaulted her. He strangled her with a shoestring and one of the straps from her overalls. Hamner also stated that Michael left Kelly there and returned a few days later to move her body to Brown County and dumped her over in a ravine where he hoped she would never be found. And Michael Overstreet's brother Scott testified that in the early morning hours of September 27, 1997, I received a call from my brother. Michael asked me to meet him at a local motel. Michael wasn't specific about what he wanted, but it was clear to me that he needed my help. So I drove to the motel and met him in the parking lot. He informed me that his girlfriend was in the van and they had been drinking and needed a ride. From my peripheral vision, I could see something white in the back of his van. I left my car in the motel parking lot, got in my brother's van, and started driving him and his girlfriend to their destination. But about 15 minutes into the ride, Michael told me that he had changed his mind and now wanted to go to Camp Atterbury, which is a park in the neighboring counties. When I asked why he wanted to go to Camp Atterbury, he replied, I took a girl.
Now, his wife Melissa testified that Scott came to her house early in the morning and told her that what had just happened. She then drove Scott back to the motel in the van so Scott could retrieve his car. In the back of the van, she noticed several empty shell casings and a can of mace that she had never seen before. Melissa then went to the rifle range as Scott had instructed her at Michael's direction. She arrived there about 3:30 a.m. and spotted her husband. According to Melissa, as Michael approached the van, he was sweating, his shirt was unbuttoned, and he was carrying a blanket and a rifle. When Melissa asked why he was out there so late at the rifle range, Overstreet responded that if anyone asked concerning his whereabouts, she should tell them that he was out that night drinking with friends.
Now, May 13, 2000, jurors did find Overstreet guilty of all charges against him, and on May 18th recommended he receive the death penalty. Johnson Superior Court Judge Cynthia Eckert agreed, and on July 31st sentenced him to Indiana's death row. On January 5th of 2000, Overstreet's 4 children asked the judge to allow them to change their last name to their mother's maiden name. The request was initially denied because Overstreet had not yet been tried and convicted. Now, after the trial was over and judge ruled that the rights of a single mother outweighed those of an incarcerated father and did grant the name change request, so the kids are now known as Holland. I can understand that. I mean, think about it. Live in a town.
Yeah.
Regardless of, how kids are.
Prosecutors who won the case still believe they prevented Michael from killing others. This was a very dangerous person who won't be on the street again, said prosecutor Lance Hamner. His DNA was in and on and around the victim, said Chief Deputy Prosecutor Brad Cooper. I think of a guy who was probably on his way to being a serial killer who just happened to get caught the first time, said Cooper. He was one evil dude.
Yeah. Good job, Indiana Police. Nice job.
So Michael Overstreet was scheduled to be executed on May 30th of 2008, but he had been consistently filing appeals. In 2014, attorneys for the convicted killer at this point, who had spent 15 years awaiting execution, launched what could be his last legal challenge by questioning whether he's competent enough to be put to death. So there's always aggravating and mitigating circumstances, and what matters here is the mitigating circumstances, which were a deprived and abusive childhood, schizotypal personality disorder, psychological deterioration, hallucinations as a child, including demons. His mother failed to seek mental help for him, and he spent 6 weeks in the Navy before being discharged for mental illness. So obviously, he was mentally ill.
Yeah, he had some issues. So now in November of 2014, the Indiana Supreme Court Judge Jane Miller, after 4 days of testimony from doctors and evaluations, ruled that Michael Overstreet was not competent to be executed at this time. Miller stated that if the state at any time proves that he is understanding of his actions and he is competent, then the execution could proceed. However, after an interview, the Indiana Attorney General Greg Zoller said he would not appeal the trial court's ruling that Overstreet is incompetent to be executed because it would most likely fail. It'd just be a waste of time. So is this fair, you think? I mean, do you think that if a guy that you think was a serial killer, that went to these lengths, obviously this was premeditated. He knew what he's doing. He did it. He murdered somebody. So that's where I get that psychological problem. I understand he's out there. But usually those episodes, do they usually last long enough for all that to occur where you actually go to a store, you follow somebody, and you enact this plan to kill someone? That's not like you went crazy and this just happened. That's not like a crime of passion, if you will.
I honestly don't know.
I guess it depends on how long the psychotic episode lasts.
Well, psychotic episodes can last days and even weeks.
I guess that makes sense. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So I suppose it could be, but in all honesty, like I said before, and you kind of get me turned to this because I know how you are on this scenario. It almost seems to me like life in prison is worse than just death.
I agree with that.
You remember that because we talked about in the Adam Walsh case, Dahmer said, "Hey, I'll tell you I did it if you'll fucking kill me now. If you'll put me the death penalty and you'll put me to death right now, I'll admit to doing that." That tells you right there just how bad being in prison was for Dahmer. One thing that I always like to talk about to end something like this, because remember, we've got a victim, Kelly, and her family. The family's always the victims. So what they've done, Franklin College has actually established an endowed scholarship fund. There is a scholarship fund for Kelly, and there's also a memorial scholarship fund.
That's good.
Kelly's legacy obviously still lives on and is blooming at Franklin College. Now, there was one girl that they interviewed back then. Nicole Hensley said, "It's very beautiful in the spring once the tree blooms. Walking by it, everyone notices how pretty it is, but sadly not everybody knows what it means, but she knew what it means." Hensley attended the same high school as Kelly Eckart and attended Franklin College in part because of Kelly. She was one of the first recipients of the Kelly Eckart Scholarship Fund through the Franklin College and was actually in 5th grade at the time Kelly Eckart was murdered. Now, as we always talk about, the families of the living victims, so Connie Sutton still wears Kelly's ring with her birthstone. She has finally gotten back from the police the glasses, the ankle bracelet, and the car keys that Kelly had that night she was murdered. And she says, "It is sometimes hard to touch it because the last time she touched it, Kelly wasn't breathing." Sutton watches home videos all the time of her daughter getting ready for school dance, rollerblading on the driveway, and practicing at Triton Central Color Guard where she went to high school. This is just one way that Kelly's mom just keeps her memory alive. It's a very sad scenario. I can't even imagine that. We've interviewed mothers.
Yeah.
We've talked to people and we've done research. It's just a very sad scenario when the family is the living victim.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really heartbreaking. So.
Yep.
Now, living there, I didn't know, like, the Eckert family, Kelly. So you can actually, on this case here, if you wanted to just get, like, a quick little episode, it was several years back, but it was called Blanket of Evidence on
Forensic Files. Yeah.
They covered this case, Blanket of Evidence. And again, it's Evil Lives Here, and I can't think of the name that they called it, the name of the case, but it's the Michael Overstreet case. Actually, it was Melissa Holland is the wife's name. But she was on Evil Lives Here. And she tells a pretty gruesome story of how like demanding and controlling this guy was. Yeah. But he still lives. He's still alive. And I guess he's never going to get executed. So he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison based on all of the appeals and everything. I guess that's it for tonight. I hope everyone, I don't want to say enjoys the story, but how else do you finish
I don't know.
I guess if you're in a true crime story and you listen to this shit, you just enjoy the story. It's just all you can do.
Make sure to join us next week for an episode of Off Topic and next month for another episode of Vacation Edition.
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is we're going to start covering cases of different cases. I'm not sure I want to try to... I got to tell you, it is so damn tough to go to different countries because even if I put in requests, they like send back smiley face and little giggles like, yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, we're doing some, what do they call it? Like reorganization
of the Vacation Edition. So we're gonna still go to vacation spots, but it's gonna take me a lot longer to get those cases.
I actually already have our next one.
So we're gonna try to get some other stuff in there. What we're not gonna do is we're not gonna talk about BTK, Dahmer, and the ones that everybody talks about. But we're gonna try to hit some other cases here and there. So anyway, we want to thank everyone again. You guys are patrons and we love you and we really appreciate all your support.
Really appreciate your support.
I am sorry that this case is a little late. I was waiting for an actual interview with Scott, which I was ready for, but got kind of denied. And I was hoping to get my brother in here, but maybe we'll get him in on an off topic to discuss it.
All right.
So thank you, everyone.
For listening to Paradise After Dark.
Dark.